All right, everyone. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Punishment, the podcast where we take complicated policies, remove the confusing government language, and talk about them like normal folks, normal people. I'm your host, Charles Williford, and before I get started, I have a question for you. Have you ever been scrolling through Facebook and seen someone say, "Why are we giving addicts free needles?" Or just arrest them? Or, my personal favorite, if they wanted help, they would just stop. Now, if you spend more than 5 minutes on social media, you've probably seen all three, right? So today, we're going to find out what's fact, what's fiction, and why harm reduction might be one of the most misunderstood public policies in America. Now, listen, give me a second. Don't worry. This isn't going to sound like your economics professor reading PowerPoint slides for an hour. I promise. I promise. We're going to keep it simple. We're going to take a road trip, baby boy, baby girls. So buckle up. And our first stop is going to be in Tennessee. Tennessee, Tennessee. And then we're headed north to New York City, baby. New York. And we're going to make a quick stop over in Washington, D.C. and see what the federal government is cooking up. And then, if we play nice with President Trump, he may let us hop on Air Force One over to Portugal. Now, if he doesn't let us hop on Air Force One, we're going to have to go commercial because we're broke. All right. So, and we're going to look at how Portugal basically said, we're going to try something completely different than everybody else when it comes to harm reduction. And hopefully, ladies and gentlemen, by the end of this episode, you'll know who has the strictest policies, who has the boldest policies, and what actually works, and whether spending money on harm reduction is actually helping communities or it's just creating more debates. So, buckle up. And unlike state legislators, we're actually going somewhere today, right after this 30-second break. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen. Now, like I said, our first stop is going to be in Tennessee. Tennessee. Now, if Tennessee were a person, it would probably be that uncle at the barbecue who says, back in the day, we didn't have all these programs. People just needed to be more disciplined. And Uncle Joe's probably right. Uncle Joe, it's fair, right? But for years, Tennessee's approach to substance use was pretty straightforward. Hear me out. Enforce the law, encourage treatment, and hope for the best. But then the opioid epidemic came along and basically said, yeah, that's not going to be enough. Overdose deaths increased, hospitals became overwhelmed, communities saw more HIV and hepatitis C infections linked to injection drug use, like syringe use. So Tennessee had to make a decision basically. We can either keep doing the same thing or we can try something different. So in 2017, Tennessee authorized nonprofit organizations to operate syringe service programs. Now, before somebody in the back starts yelling, they're handing out needles. Let's slow down for a second. These programs don't just provide clean syringes, all right? They also offer HIV testing, hepatitis testing, overdose injections, overdose education, sorry. Um, they provide Narcan, referrals to treatment, and connections to healthcare. So think of it this way. If someone is already using drugs, would you rather they use a clean syringe or or one that could expose them to HIV or hepatitis? Now, that's a legit question, so think about it. That's really what harm reduction is about. It's re- reducing harm while creating opportunities for recovery. It's not about giving up on people, it's about refusing to give up on people. Now, listen, let's take another short 30-minute break because that was a lot to unpack. And then we're gonna hop in a plane and we're gonna fly over to New York, okay? I'll see you in 30 seconds. All aboard to New York City, y'all. All right. This is the plane taking off from the Memphis airport to New York. All right, all right, all right. So again, we're gonna leave Tennessee. We're gonna drive about nine. We're gonna fly about 900 miles north to New York. Right now, if Tennessee is that uncle at the family cookout, then New York, New York is that cousin who says, "Yeah, I know Grandma doesn't like my ideas, but I'm gonna do it anyways." Now that's how New York does policy when it comes to harm reduction. So when it comes to harm reduction, New York just doesn't tiptoe in the water. It cannonballs into the deep end, baby. For decades, New York has treated substance use as both criminal justice issues and a public health issue. Instead of waiting until someone decides they're ready for treatment, the state has invested in programs designed to keep people alive long enough to make that decision themselves. Now, how awesome is that? One of New York's biggest investment has been syringe service programs, often calls often called SSPs. So, like Tennessee, these programs provide clean syringes, HIV and hepatitis testing. They offer Narcan and referrals to treatment. But New York didn't stop there, baby. Listen, in 2021, New York became the first state in the country to support overdose prevention centers, sometimes called supervised consumption sites. Now, I know some of you just raised an eyebrow. The idea is definitely controversial. These are places where people can use previously obtained drugs under medical supervision. I know some of y'all are falling out of your seats. Now, if someone overdoses, trained staff, trained staff members can respond immediately with Narcan and emergency care right there at the facility. Think of it like having a lifeguard at a swimming pool, right? Now, nobody is encouraging people to drown. The lifeguard is there because sometimes people do, if we're being honest. Okay? Supporters say these centers prevent overdose deaths, reduce public drug use, decrease discarded syringes, and connect people to treatment. Now, critics argue that these programs normalize drug use and worry they could encourage continued substance use. So, who's right? Well, the research is actually pretty interesting if we take a look at it. Studies have found that overdose prevention centers reduce fatal overdoses in the surrounding areas without increasing crime or drug use. They also help connect people to healthcare, housing services, and addiction treatment. One thing I found interesting about researching this project is that New York spends a lot of time asking, how do we keep someone alive today? While Tennessee often asks, how do we get someone into treatment? Now, Neither question is wrong. They're just approaching the same problem from a different direction. Now let's compare the two. If someone overdoses in Tennessee, there's a good chance Narcan will be available if someone nearby has it, right? If someone overdoses in side of New York's overdose prevention treatment center, medical staff are already standing there waiting. It's kind of like the difference between calling 911 after the kitchen catches on fire or having the fire department sitting in your driveway. Both are trying to stop the fire. One just gets there a little faster. Now, does New York approach solve addiction? No. There isn't a single policy in the world that magically makes addiction disappear. If there were, I'd probably end this podcast right here. But what New York has shown is that reducing overdose deaths and connecting people to treatment don't have to be separate goals. Sometimes helping someone arrive today is the first step towards helping them to recover tomorrow. Now, in our next stop, we're leaving the States behind and we're heading over to Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. with our pinkies out and see what role the federal government plays in all of this. Because believe it or not, the federal government has a lot more influence than most people realize. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. So, we looked at Tennessee, we survived New York. Now, let's make a quick stop in Washington, D.C. And 41 says the federal government should make one rule for everybody. I hate to break it to you, that's not how it works. I think the federal government, like the parent of three teenagers, it can set some rules, it can provide money, and it can give advice. But at the end of the day, Tennessee and New York are still going to make some of their own decisions, right? Just like our teenagers. That's why harm reduction looks so different from state to state. So, what exactly does the federal government do? Instead of running syringe service programs itself, the federal government mainly provides funding, research, guidance, and public health recommendations. Organizations like the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and the Office of National Drug Control Policy help states develop overdose prevention programs, expand treatment services, and improve access to life saving medications like Narcan. One thing I found interesting is that the federal government doesn't believe there's one magic solution to addiction. Its national strategy focuses on prevention, harm reduction, treatment, and recovery all at the same time. So basically, it's the social work version of why can't we do all of it? And honestly, that's a fair question. Now, let's leave the United States for a second. That again, that was the plane taking off. We are in Air Force One. We are headed across the Atlantic, Antarctica, somewhere. Anyways, we're headed over to Portugal. All right. Now, Portugal Portugal gets brought up almost every single time people talk about drug policy. Sometimes people describe it like it's a magical place where they solve addiction forever. Spoiler alert, they didn't. But they did do something that completely changed the conversation. Back in 2001, Portugal decriminalized the possession of small amount of drugs for personal use. Notice I said decriminalized, not legalized. There's a big difference. People caught with small amount of drugs aren't automatically sent to jail. Instead, they're referred to a panel made up of health and social service professionals who evaluate their situation and determine whether treatment, education, or another response would be most appropriate. Drug trafficking, still illegal. Manufacturing drugs, still illegal. Breaking Bad, still definitely illegal. The goal wasn't to say drugs are okay. The goal was to say maybe addiction is a health problem before it's a criminal problem. Portugal also invested heavily in treatment, recovery services, housing support, and harm reduction programs. And there's something that's important. A lot of people think Portugal only changed one law. It didn't. It changed an entire system. Imagine trying to fix a leaking roof, right? You could keep putting buckets of water on the floor every time it rains, right? Or you could actually repair the roof. Portugal tried fixing the roof. Now, has everything been perfect? No. Portugal still struggles with substance use, overdoses, and access to treatment. No country has eliminated addiction. If they had, every other country would probably copy their homework, right? But many researchers agree that Portugal's public health approach has helped reduce stamina and improve access to treatment while shifting the conversation away from punishment alone. So, after looking at Tennessee, New York, the federal government, and Portugal, one thing becomes really clear. Everybody agrees addiction is a serious problem. They just disagree on the best way to solve it. Some people, some believe stricter laws create healthier communities. Others believe that healthier communities are created when people have easier access to healthcare, treatment, and harm reduction services. And maybe the answer isn't choosing one side or the other. Maybe it's finding the right balance. In our final segment, after this next 30-second break, I'll share my thoughts on which policies I believe work best, what Tennessee can learn from these different approaches, and what role social workers have in shaping the future policies. All right, welcome back to the final segment of the Beyond Punishment podcast. All right, so after looking at Tennessee, New York, and the federal government, and Portugal, here's the question I've been asking myself throughout this project: who's doing it right? And honestly, I don't think it's that simple. I don't believe Tennessee has everything figured out. I don't believe New York has all the answers. And I definitely don't think Portugal found some magical cure for addiction. But I do think that every one of them has something we can learn from, right? Tennessee has shown that expanding access to Narcan and syringe service program can save lives while still encouraging treatment. New York reminds us that if we're willing to think differently, we can develop new ways to prevent overdose deaths and connect people to healthcare. Portugal reminds us that addiction isn't just a criminal justice issue, it's also a public health issue that deserves compassion, treatment, and long term support. If I could recommend changes in Tennessee, I would start by expanding harm reduction services into more rural communities where resources are often limited. I also think that we need to continue educating the public about what harm reduction actually is. To many people, they hear the phrase and immediately assume it's encouraging drug use, when the real goal is to reduce harm, prevent disease, and save lives. Another recommendation would be increasing access to mental health services and recovery support after treatment. Recovery doesn't end when someone leaves a rehabilitation program. Now, if you don't take anything else from this podcast, I want you to remember that one statement. Recovery doesn't end when someone leaves a rehabilitation program. Many people need ongoing counseling, housing assistance, employment support, and community connections to maintain long term recovery. As a future social worker, this project has challenged me to think differently about policy. Before this course, I mostly thought about how policy affected individuals. Now I realize that policies shape entire communities. They influence healthcare, public safety, housing, employment, education, and even how people view those living with substance abuse disorders. One thing I keep coming back to is this: behind every policy, behind every statistic, behind every overdose number is a person, someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's parent, someone's best friend. It's easy to debate policies. It's much harder to ignore the people those policies affect. I don't think every harm reduction strategy will work the same in every community. I don't think one state should automatically copy another, but I do believe that we should be willing to learn from each other. If something is reducing overdose deaths, let's study it. If something is helping people into recovery, let's support it. If something isn't working, let's be willing to change it. Because at the end of the day, public policy should never be about proving who's right. It should be about improving people's lives. Now, thank you for joining me on this episode of Beyond Punishment. I hope today's discussion gave you a better understanding of how Tennessee, New York, the federal government, and Portugal each approach harm reduction differently and why those differences matter. You guys have a good night.